Now we turn to something different and very special. It's a story decades in the making that sheds light on the politics of today in the broadest sense. Now, I've been working on parts of this for the last few weeks, and I believe it will interest you a lot. It begins as a story of crime and drugs, politics and fashion in 1970s Harlem, with shootouts, dice games, and a drug epidemic that sparked a national crackdown in policing.
On the streets of New York, it's called crack, and the deals go down quickly.
With crack so cheap and accessible on inner city streets, and with the waiting list for drug treatment programs so long, no one is even guessing at how widespread the epidemic of crack babies will be.
This squad of cops, all but one white, is heading for patrol duty in New York's predominantly black Harlem. There have been charges of abuse and brutality.
The U.S. murder rate hit an all-time high back then in 1980. New York was ground zero. Ruthless gangsters like Nicky Barnes, Harlem's biggest drug dealer, scared the city, and many saw this problem as a product of black inner-city neighborhoods, while plenty of gangsters outside Harlem also terrorized New York with brazen violence. On a busy street in Midtown Manhattan, gangsters assassinated mob boss Big Paul Castellano. Drug and gang violence was rampant, and New Yorkers like Donald Trump called for a crackdown as law and order became a national political mantra.
I hate these people, and let's all hate these people, because maybe hate is what we need if we're going to get something done.
Crime today is an American epidemic. We intend to do what is necessary to end the drug menace and cripple organized crime.
Politics shapes policy, and there were new laws for the war on drugs, waged largely against poor and minorities. And this was the environment that raised this man, Daniel Day. Born in Harlem in 1944, he did what many young men did to survive: hustling, gambling, finding ways to make money underground. And while so many of his peers were cut down by drugs or violence or prison, Day not only survived, he thrived by building the persona Dapper Dan. First as one of the best-dressed hustlers in Harlem, then as a fur salesman, then turning himself into the fashion icon he is today, originating a luxury style that fashion companies were not offering. Top houses like Louis Vuitton and Gucci did not cater to Harlem's black community. Dan saw a market opportunity. His peers prized luxury brands that these companies didn't even sell as clothes. And Dan knew then what many corporations were ignoring. Harlem had style, it had customers, and it had money, especially from the gangsters. So Dan innovated a whole new look from whole cloth, buying up Gucci bags and luggage for the logo, sewing it onto newly tailored clothes, and marketing that as a new street style, a remix of downtown luxury, uptown. Take a look at this bomber jacket with the Gucci logo prominently featured along with that custom leather trim. It repurposes the iconic Gucci G for a new jacket. And Dan says his customers knew he was making something original. They weren't paying for the Gucci logo, but for the remix. And the style became a hit. With underworld anti-heroes like some of these gangsters, Dan lined some of the coats with bulletproof material upon request. Athletes and musicians started to echo the same style. Here are his tailored jackets for then heavyweight champ Mike Tyson, or NBA player Walter Berry, sporting this jacket covered in Louis Vuitton logos, the same look favored, as you see here, by the rappers, the Fat Boys, or rapper LL Cool J wearing a tracksuit covered in those logos. Stars ranging from Beyonce to Selma Hayek would go on to rock Dan's signature style. And Dan's Harlem shop grew from the attention. While his customers paid extra for the Dapper Dan look, they knew they weren't buying a Gucci product, just like Andy Warhol's fans knew he was making art, not soup ads. But the fashion houses did not see it that way. They cracked down, suing Dan, seizing his product. More heat followed, subpoenas for his Harlem clients, raids on his store. There was even a talented young lawyer named Sonia Sotomayor, now on the Supreme Court, who showed up one day to help her fashion client lead a raid. Dan recalls she did everything by the book and even complimented a mink coat he had in the showroom. Dan had many customers and artists on his side, and most culture echoes something. Picasso joked bad artists copy and mature artists steal. He openly remixed other artists like you see here, Velázquez. But the fashion houses had money and power on their side, and they ran Dan's shop out of business. He went back underground, battled financial troubles and some sad days, struggling with the next step after a life's work was shut down. Now in his 70s, what was left? And I want to tell you, this story could end there. But that thing about artists copying and stealing, it came full circle as one of the fashion houses that sued Dan was now copying his signature look. You see here from 1989, the Dapper Dan outfit, and Gucci echoing it in this runway jacket in 2017, igniting controversy over why a corporation gets to do the very thing it sued Dan over. Now, they first claimed it was an homage, and the story might end there with some blowback until people moved on. But then Gucci partnered with Dan to reopen his boutique in Harlem so they could make clothes together, uniting the fashions of the runway and the street under one roof and offering an alternative ending for two styles that were so rivalrous they competed as they copied each other. This all includes Dan's triumphant return and his appearance at the height of fashion Anna Wintour's Met Gala just this past May. Dan says people coveted his fashions because he deconstructed brands to the essence of their power, crests that signified wealth, respect, and prestige. He explains, my customers wanted to buy into that power. Dan built wealth, respect, and power for himself and his community and lost some of it when those corporations came for him. It's a testament to his work and the spirit of Harlem that he now stands taller than ever astride these two worlds, drawing respect and power from both. My special guest tonight is Dapper Dan. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you. That was an excellent introduction. Thank you so much.
You have inspired a lot of people. How did you persevere when, as we saw, there was so much coming up against you?
You know, Larry, I think that when you're born poor and you go through early trials and tribulations, you always have that ability to bounce back. You know, I mean, everybody knows how to do good, but we learned early on how to do bad. So coming back was just in my blood.
We look at a young Donald Trump,
yes,
bad-mouthing Harlem. Mm-hmm. We looked at President Reagan singling out the drug epidemic. What did you learn from the excesses of crime and violence in that era that you had to survive?
You would have to have lived in it to understand, right? And at the time, when the RICO Act put a lot of minority people in jail, but at the time, there was a major change taking place. You can argue that we have a lot of men of color in the national penitentiaries and throughout the country now, but you have to have seen what a crack baby looks like. You know, when you see what a crack baby looks like, and if you go back in time to see what that is, to see a baby crying through the night and see families begging, walking away and leaving their children, you know, it's a different feel.
We have a culture, I would argue, across diverse communities where there is a glorification with the drug and gangster life, whether it's The Godfather, and that's Italian mafia, mm-hmm. or the Harlem gangsters we're talking about, or Scarface. Mm-hmm. What do you say to young people or people who look at this, how to tap into that without being destroyed by it? You
know, that's the irony of the whole thing. The thing I'm trying to escape from, they were glorifying, you know, and it turned out that. But what the message I try to give the young guys is that, you know, we gangsters, we would never, and the culture was never about glorifying it and staying involved in it. The culture was about, with the gangsters, to escape it. And then the rappers came along and changed the message. They changed it to make it look glorified, make it look honey-coated, and it wasn't honey at all.
I want to take a page out of musician Nas, who's very famous, worked with many artists, talking about you, because so many people in the culture in Harlem and beyond mm-hmm. knew about you even after you were shut down. Take a look.
Mm-hmm.
He had the foresight to do back then what they just started doing maybe 10 years, 5 years after him.
Would you be at the height you are now without the stars and without the streets? And which mattered more in supporting you?
It's a combination of both, because the stars are important because they interpret the culture of the street. And the reason the stars gravitated towards me is that I was the street. They were buying in to the life that I walked away from. So the credibility was enormous. I'm the guy in between who can take them there, who can give them that credibility, and that's why they gravitated towards me.
You write in here, the only people who were excited about hustling were people who didn't actually have to do it every day.
Exactly. The street has a light side and a dark side. If you don't understand that, you'll be there when it implodes. Even a person like myself is skilled and is knowledgeable of it myself. I had to realize that you cannot be in it and not of it. So eventually I had to withdraw. That's, you know, and when I went underground, I said, I have a bullet in my neck as a result of trying to be there, you know. There was days, I had a 3-story building on 125th Street, but I started out from a table on 125th Street. And when the brands rated me down, I always prepared myself to start all over again, and I went back to a table on 125th Street, and then underground for 20 years, man. So that's something I was prepared to do.
I want to ask you something a little funny. That's the exact story you described, because near the end of the book, everything's shut down, it looks dark, and you say you had trouble even selling a T-shirt at that very table.
Yes.
And I read that and I thought, here's someone, if I may, and tell me if I'm wrong, here's someone who has incredible pride, but very little ego.
Yeah, and that's the key. If you can bury your ego, then there's always possibilities. You know, I'm riding around in a Mercedes-Benz, Gucci'd out. I'm riding around with a Jeep, MCM out. I mean, I'm the talk of the town. But I had to learn to swallow that and go back to where I started at and start all over again. And that incident you're talking about, when I had to start all over, I was out there and tour buses was coming to Harlem on 125th Street, and I was trying to sell T-shirts. I counted 144 buses and didn't sell one T-shirt.
In a single day?
In a single day. And I was determined to turn that around. The next year I looked up, I had $100,000. So that's what perseverance is. But I knew that I could do that.
Did you think you'd be here at this age, at this height?
My end mission is to talk about what we're talking about now. I've seen it. I'm the last generation that's seen Harlem before a drug epidemic, and I need to remind people of what we are. This is not who we are. All the children that's growing up now and the young men that's growing up now, they're growing up in a drug culture. And I have to tell a story. Fashion is my platform to tell this biggest story, and that's what I want to go on to do. But I think the devastating effect and the root of a lot of young black men and Hispanic young men in jail has everything to do with the culture that grew out of the drug epidemics.
It's a fascinating story that you tell here and that you're here to continue to lead on. I appreciate you coming by The Beat. The book is Dapper Dan, Made in Harlem, a memoir. Dapper Dan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Harry. Thank you so much.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.